Question 2 on the American West paper from 2025 asks you to write a narrative account analysing the key developments of early migration west in the years 1835 to 1849. There are two parts of this question that you need to pay attention to before you even think about answering it. We know it's going to ask us to write a narrative account, but the key thing here in this question is that it's asking you to think about developments of early migration, and specifically it's asking you to think about these years from 1835 to 1849. This question is worth 8 marks. It does suggest a couple of things for us in the question. So it suggests the Oregon Trail, it suggests that you might want to talk about the California Gold Rush. But let's have a look at the mark scheme before we try and answer it. So to get 8 marks on this question, to get into that level 3 mark band, you need to do two things. You need to give a narrative which organises material into a clear sequence of events leading to an outcome. And that means that you are going to write your answer in chronological order, in time order, and probably that you're going to want to use time connectives at the beginning of each paragraph, because that will help you to analyse the link between the events and also show that you are coherently and logically structuring it. You also need to include accurate and relevant information showing good knowledge and understanding. So that's where your specific factual detail comes into answering this question. So let's have a look at a paragraph together. Here is a model answer that I prepared earlier. So let's go through it and work out where all of those marks have come from. You need to make sure that you write in really 3 paragraphs to answer this question properly, even though it is only worth 8 marks. So remember, we're starting in chronological order. So here I'm talking about early migration. So one key development, and this is the P in my Peel paragraph, in early migration west between 1835 and the early 1840s was the establishment of the Oregon Trail as the main route for settlers travelling west. That's some specific information. Explorers, missionaries and traders helped map the route across the Great Plains, more specific information, and through the Rocky Mountains, showing that wagons could cross the mountains safely using the South Pass, which was the only practical route for covered wagons. This made large-scale migration possible for families rather than just individuals on horseback. At the same time, the belief in manifest destiny encouraged Americans to expand westwards, as many believed it was their God-given right to settle the continent. As a result, the Oregon Trail became the main pathway for migration and laid the foundations for larger numbers of settlers to travel west later in the 1840s. So linking back to the question there about what part this information has to play in the narrative. So that's my first Peel paragraph. Okay, looking at the second one then, and you'll notice that I've put signposts at the start of each paragraph explaining how they're all linking together. So here, where I'm putting a second key development. So a second key development, and this is my, this is my point, was the economic difficulties in the eastern United States during the 1840s. So specific information, which pushed many people to migrate west along the Oregon Trail. Economic crises led to unemployment, wage cuts, and poverty. So again, we've got really specific things here that I'm explaining, meaning many families struggle to survive in the East. The West offers the possibility of cheap land and new opportunities, which encourage people to risk the long journey. And as a result, thousands of migrants began following the Oregon Trail in large wagon trains, such as during the Great Migration of 1843. However, the journey was extremely dangerous and not all groups were successful. For example, then I've talked about the Donner Party in 1846. And then finally, my link back to the question. So this shows that although migration increased due to economic hardship, the journey west remained extremely risky. And then I've got one final paragraph. So here at the start of the paragraph, you can see I've used a signpost there for my point. The final key development was the discovery of gold in California in 1848. So this is a really specific example that I'm putting even in my point sentence, which led to the gold rush of 1849, so again another date, and dramatically increased migration west. Before this, many Americans feared the dangers of the journey across the plains and mountains. However, news of gold spread rapidly and thousands of people were willing to risk the journey in the hope of becoming rich. Around 80,000 migrants travelled to California in 1849 alone, and they became known as the 49ers, many using the established trails that had been developed earlier in the period. Consequently, the discovery of gold overcame much of the fear surrounding westward travel and transformed migration into a mass movement of people, marking the culmination of early migration west between 1835 and 1849. So I've linked back to the question there. So if I just zoom out, you can see this is the whole answer to the question. So there's 3 Peel paragraphs where I'm including lots of specific information. My answer is chronological, and I'm explaining the link between each of these paragraphs as I go through. You'll note, for instance, the link between introducing the Oregon Trail here and then saying that economic difficulties encourage people to use the Oregon Trail here. So it's that sort of consistency of argument that will lead you to get a grade 9 in history.